This educational video has to do with the work of Erik Erikson and his 8 stages of psychosocial development, psychosocial. And what that term means is how one's social environment, the people around you, affect your psychological development, and then in turn how you relate back to others socially. Erikson gets the credit for coining that particular term. In just a moment, a video is going to start done by a gentleman named Rory Lee Oakes, and he does a really fine job of this particular topic. One of the interesting things that he does is to contrast the work of Erikson to the work of Sigmund Freud, which is the order in which these two are usually taught. However, in the Stangor textbook, the one that you're using, you get Erikson first and then Freud when we come to chapter number 8. So pay attention when he mentions Freud, and just a heads up here that we will be getting to that in the next chapter that we cover. So take care now and enjoy this video.
My name is Rory Lee Oakes, and in this presentation we're going to look at Erikson's theory of psychosocial development. Erik Erikson, I'll give you a little bit of a biography about the man. He was born on June the 15th, 1902 in Frankfurt in Germany. He died May the 12th, 1994 in Massachusetts in the USA. He was dual American-German citizenship, his nationality. His fields were developmental psychology, and that's the area of psychology which looks how human beings develop through their lives, mentally develop through their lives. He was influenced by Sigmund Freud and Anna Freud. He coined the term lifespan development, which we're going to look at as the presentation moves on. And his key idea was theories of social development. Erik Erikson developed 8 stages of human growth, and his theories are best known for personality development, how we develop our personalities from children through to adulthood and through to older adulthood. He believed that personality develops in a series of predetermined stages, and he talked of 8 stages. His theories are psychosocial and not psychosexual. For those of you who've studied the work of Freud, you'll know that Freud's ideas are based on a growing sexualization of the infants as they discover their sexuality. Erikson's theories aren't like that. Erikson's theories are about how a child socializes and how it makes sense of the world around it. In each stage of development, Erikson described conflicts that act as turning points in life. So there's a sense here of a choice. We sometimes come to a conflict and make a psychological choice of how we're going to view the world and our situation. In Erikson's view, these conflicts are centered on either developing a psychological quality or failing to develop that quality. So this is very much a growth model, rather like the ideas of Carl Rogers, parallels his thinking. This is about someone deciding to make an effort to change the way they think and adapt to a changing world. The first stage is between 0 and 18 months, and it's called basic trust versus mistrust. Infants learn about the basics of trustworthiness and the environment. If they receive attention and affection, they form a global impression of a trustworthy and secure world. If they receive pain and stress, they believe life is unpredictable and untrustworthy. So right at the beginning of life, if we experience the world as somewhere where we're loved and we can trust our caregivers, then we will grow up with the idea that, generally speaking, the world is trustworthy and secure. However, if we receive pain and stress, then we'll probably grow up to believe that the world isn't a very trustworthy place, and that's going to affect how we build relationships in later life. If you can't trust people, then it's going to be very difficult, isn't it, to form any kind of relationship with another human being. The second stage is autonomy versus shame and doubt, and this starts at 18 months to 3 years. Toddlers discover their own bodies and how to control them. If they succeed in doing things for themselves and gain a sense of self-confidence and self-control. But if they fail continuously, they feel shame and self-doubt. And I guess things like potty training is one area where children are discovering the mechanisms of their body, and certainly exploring their genitalia. And if you have a caregiver who constantly criticises the child for doing this, or constantly criticises the child for not being able to use the potty, then what might happen is that they will feel shame and self-doubt. And again, this will impact as they move through into later life. Between 4 to 5 years old, the third stage is initiative versus guilt. Children at 4 or 5 start to explore beyond their own bodies and explore their outside world. They're making sense of the outside world. If exploration projects and activities are effective, they will learn to deal with people and things in a constructive way and have a strong sense of initiative. If they are criticised or punished, they learn to feel guilty for many of their own actions. So if you have a child who is kept indoors, who is cosseted, not allowed to explore the outside world, or punished if they do, they might feel guilty for their own actions, and they might also have difficulty exploring and growing up in a world where they have to go out into it and find out for themselves what it's like. 6 years to puberty is the stage that Erikson named industry versus inferiority. Children at 6 to 11 develop numerous skills, and their sense of self is enriched by realistic development. A negative evolution at this time is damaging. And, this is really about school, isn't it? If a child has a realistic idea of what they attempt and get out of school and succeed at school, they're more likely to be settled adults as they grow older. But if they, for some reason, don't understand the world they're in or struggle with the skills they're developing, they may likely carry that through into adulthood. At adolescence, one of the stages would be called identity achievement versus role confusion. Children learn a number of different roles, and it's important to sort out and integrate these various roles into one constant identity. If a child fails to do this, the result is what Erikson calls ego diffusion. So as children move into adulthood, they are realising that they have different roles in the world. They may be students, they may be brothers and sisters, they may be boyfriends or girlfriends, they may have lots of different roles. And the idea of these roles integrate into the personality. So a person feels that yes, they can do all of these different roles at the appropriate time. But if a child fails to do this, if a child fails to understand that they have a number of roles in the world, they get what they call ego diffusion. It's best described as being a bit lost, not knowing what to do, being unsure of your place in the world. In early adulthood and through to 20s and 30s, the central conflict is that of intimacy and isolation. And it is called intimacy versus isolation. And this is the ability to share one's life with another person of either sex without fear of losing one's own identity. And sometimes as a counsellor, I see clients who have lost who they are. They've lost their identity. They are so wrapped up or so conditioned into thinking that they're a son, a daughter, a worker, a mother, a father, that there's lots of roles, but actually they don't know who they are. And because of that, they're unable to share with very close people their feelings. They struggle to talk about their feelings, and sometimes they struggle to be intimate with somebody else, and that can be intimate either emotionally or sexually. And again, people do seek counselling to try and make sense of this conflict. As we move to middle adulthood, 40s and 50s, we are more free to direct our attention to the assistance of others. And it's no coincidence that between 40 and 50, a lot of people volunteer. There's lots of people who volunteer to help people. And individuals direct their energy without conflict to the solution of social issues. And failure to resolve earlier conflicts results in a preoccupation with oneself. So as people move into 40s and 50s, they tend, there's good research to show that people tend to do kind of very charitable things. They do things for charity. But if they fail to resolve early conflicts in their life, they become self-absorbed. They become focusing too much on themselves. And what happens is that they just kind of get a bit isolated, and stagnation's a good word. They don't grow. They don't emotionally grow. And the final stage is ego integrity versus despair. It's 40s and 50s, late adulthood, to the end of life, really. And in the last stages of life, individuals look back over their lives and judge them. If they look back at their life and are satisfied, it brings a sense of integrity. But if they look back and see that they've had misdirected energies or made decisions they view weren't the best, they might have a sense of despair. And at this part of life, a lot of people are counting down the years to oblivion. And they're looking back. They may have families, they may have their careers, they may have lots of things. And what they're looking at here is how well they've achieved. And it's a psychological tipping point, as I discussed earlier in the presentation. It's a choice, and sometimes people look at this stage and they think, great, I've done this, I've done that, I've lived a really good life. And you do hear older people saying this. But for some, they focus too much on the what might have been, the what could have been, what's been lost. And it becomes a sense of despair. I put a comparison to Freud's ideas in, so you can compare Freud's ideas to Erikson's. And as you can see, there's 5 stages in Freud's ideas, which are mapped across to Erikson's. But Erikson went on to do 3 other developments. So he, unlike Freud, he mapped the whole of the lifespan from being an infant to being a senior older person. So if you're doing your studies, you can compare the different ideas between Erikson and Freud.
I am hoping that you found this video both interesting and educational. And once again, one of the things that Mr. Lees Oakes did was to contrast the work of Erik Erikson to the earlier work of Sigmund Freud. In terms of time, it would have made more sense in our course for us to cover the work of Freud first. However, the way that our textbook is organized, Freud comes later. So save a space in your brain for that, because we do talk about Freud and his psychosexual stages of development in chapter number 8. Oh, and by the way, the music you heard at the start of the video was the march by John Philip Sousa, played by the U.S. Navy Band at the Great Lakes Naval Station. If you like that march, you can stay right here and hear it from beginning to end. So take care now and have yourself a great psychology day.
very much. And also, John.